Hello everyone, you're here again for HebrewInIsrael.net, and I really hope that you enjoyed the new intro. The new intro is actually a production by Mitch. I think his last name is Houston, something like that. I can never get it right. Every time I ask him, I don't know. He always corrects me. And he actually built my website, and he's also a musician. So if you're interested in someone who can build a website for you, does an excellent job, also produces music and makes videos, he's a contact that might be good for you. What I want to first of all say is I apologize for the noise in the background. You might be hearing some noise, maybe not. It's because the entire area I live in has turned into a construction site, and there's noise not 24/7, but really quite every day, 6 days a week, for quite a few hours. So it makes it very difficult for me to make videos during the day without noise coming from the outside. So it's very unfortunate, but it is what it is. In any case, another thing is that these videos, the videos you're going to see here in the next couple of weeks are out of sequence because I made one video and then I realized I should have spoken about something else a bit, before that. So I made the video, I kept it, and I'm just going to publish these a little bit out of sequence. In any case, the subject for today is obscure pronunciations, and there are two types of obscure pronunciations that I'm seeing. One obscure pronunciation, which I think is quite reasonable, and the other one, which is not reasonable. Let me start with the not reasonable one. I am seeing people kind of inventing a new type of Hebrew, inventing Hebrew based on something that they received in some kind of revelation or something like that. As much as I respect people, I think that these make things impossible to follow, make things impossible to work with, because at the end of the day, how can we say that we can trust these pronunciations when they come from places where we don't even know if these things are real? So this has always been the problem with prophecy. I think people, even the first temple, had difficulty with prophets, and overall, they didn't know who to trust. And the same thing here. I mean, if a prophet shows up and he says, "Oh, I have to correct your Hebrew," and he proves himself as a prophet, then fine, great, maybe we do have mistakes and there is a need to pronounce things correctly. By the way, this is very important to the next video, which deals with a few things that have to do with the pronunciation of the name, but won't be exactly about the pronunciation of the name, though I do knock out two pronunciations and say, I don't think these are the right ones. And both of them are going to tick off everyone, so there really isn't much I can do. So these types of pronunciations are always very problematic. I always see them. It seems to me that a lot of this is done through innocence, wanting to kind of feel, I don't know, correct, being on the right path and things like that. And I can understand that, but the fact remains that we actually do have clear understanding of how Semitic languages are pronounced, and some of these pronunciations are very far off from what we would call Semitic language. Even though people say, no, Hebrew is a holy language, God used that language when he appeared at Mount Sinai and so on. The thing is that even back then, I think that there were certain rules that they did follow. So it's very difficult to accept these pronunciations, at least from a research level. Revelation level, like I always say, I can't really argue with that. Now, the other pronunciation, which I think is still reasonable, however, is slightly misled, is the pronunciation where people want to pronounce certain vowel consonants, which are Aleph, Hey, Vav, and Yud, but specifically Vav and Yud, in pronunciations where the spelling is full. Now, for those of you who don't exactly know what I mean here, actually, I think I made a video about this in the past. I don't remember exactly, but just to fill you in, there are words which use vowel consonants, Vav and Yud, and also Aleph and Hey, to indicate the existence of vowel points. Now, this practice actually starts off more in the Second Temple period. Actually, when you look into inscriptions from the First Temple period, the number of the cases when you have Vav and Yud and even Hey at the end of the word, the cases that you have them is a lot lower. The frequency is actually very low, and it only increases when you get deeper and deeper into the Second Temple. There are even some scrolls from the Dead Sea Scrolls which have these massive elongated words because of the adding of the Vav and the Yud. Now, granted, there are situations where people did probably pronounce Vav and Yud, such as the cases of diphthongs and Frank Moore Cross, for example, in this specific book, which, by the way, just came in the mail today, Early Hebrew Orthography, which is basically about the earliest examples we have of Hebrew does indicate situations where the spelling shows that they actually would put in a vav or a yud somewhere, which might indicate the existence of some kind of diphthong and so on, which does show the possibility of going wa or va or ya in the middle of a word, where normally today in the modern or even the traditional pronunciations of Hebrew amongst Jewish groups would not be pronounced. However, there's still a great distance between what we find in these cases. For example, Cross points out what we might find in Dead Sea Scrolls. In Dead Sea Scrolls, the situation there probably was a case of adding vowel consonants, and that's what one of the things Vav and Yud are used for. They're there to indicate Vav to indicate Cholam or Shuruk U, or Yud can indicate the I, Chirik, or Tzere, the two dots, or some people even pronounce it as a little bit, because it's slightly elongated. It's referred to as a long tzere. However, the situation still is that most of the time these are not pronounced, except for the very rare situation with German Jews who did have some kind of a tradition of pronouncing, for example, the word olam as olam. Other than that specific one, I've never seen anything else. However, I meet people who want to say Aulam and Yahuda and things like that, which are, I think, a reasonable argument, however, unattested anywhere, or attested like in one situation out of the vast number of people who did keep reading traditions. And the thing was probably that because during the time of the Second Temple, Hebrew was slightly deteriorating and people weren't 100% sure how to read, and I think because also the rise of literacy in the Jewish community in the Galilee and in Judea, there was a need to assist people. So it seems to be that they added these different vowel consonants to make it easier to read. Now, granted, people can argue against this, and I'm perfectly fine with that, because it's possible that they did pronounce things differently, and there's no actual way of proving it. However, to be very, very frank about this, the pronunciation, when people exaggerate the presence of the Vav and the Yud, there's just no actual vocalized evidence of this. And more so when we go back to First Temple spelling, we see that there actually is, there's less and less Vav and Yud, which indicates that back then they didn't pronounce it. Now, there is the argument that you pronounce what you write, but this is not necessarily exactly the case with Second Temple Hebrew. It is quite possible that what they wrote was not necessarily what they pronounced. But this is the reason why I don't want to shoot down this way of pronouncing completely, because of the fact that there actually there are spellings with extra Vav and Yud, though there is an argument why this happened. However, there is no way of disproving this because of the fact that we don't have any recordings from people back then. So the only point here is just to be very, very cautious with this, because we do have a problem. There is an increasing problem. I have this problem all the time when I discuss things with people about Hebrew, that they get told about a certain way of pronouncing and they go around pronouncing it this way. And then, for example, they come across a person like me who's also a Hebrew speaker, born and raised in Israel with Hebrew as a first language. And we kind of go and say, that's not how we pronounce it. And then it becomes a little sectarian, and people want to feel, I don't want to say something negative, but sometimes it feels like people want to feel special, or they want to, or I think more truthfully, in most of the cases I've come across, people just want to know the truth, so they're seeking for truth, and they conclude that this is the way it should be pronounced, though the evidence can be put in question. So this is just a little bit, another video about pronunciation. I made a video a very long time ago, I think it was like 3 years ago or something, about pronunciation, where I go into some things about Vav and pronunciation of Vav and so on. However, it's just to give some insight about the fact that you see this massive, these extended spelling, these full spellings with extra Vav and Yud, does not indicate that this is exactly how they pronounced it. There is a possibility that they pronounced it differently, and this was only there to indicate what vowel points you have. So just take that into consideration when you discuss this thing. Also, it's important to point out that the Masoretes dropped many of the cases of the Vav and the Yud, and even Aleph and Hey, in the spelling, because they knew that this is not how it's supposed to be pronounced. And it seems to be even that they might even known at least of some of what was going on in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They did a very, very meticulous work, and they kept these traditions over an extended period of time. The Ben Asher family didn't pop out of nowhere. These families existed for a very long time. But when they came to the conclusion, when they came to the decision making of what consonants and what vowel points, what vowel points and what consonants to use, they didn't work out in a vacuum. There were things that they worked with, and they knew that in certain situations you don't need to pronounce a vav, or you don't need to put a vav or a yud there. It wasn't arbitrary. They actually had probably access to many manuscripts, and that's probably one of the ways they made decisions. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to visit me on Facebook, Hebrew in Israel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Hebrew in Israel as well. And my website, all the links are below. Kol Tov.